So hopefully you're in the right place. Several of us thought we were in the wrong place, but we are here for a panel to talk about the OSU Extension Service Outdoor School Self-Evaluation Tools in action. So what does it actually look like when folks take these tools and try to use them? So I am going to be the primary panel facilitator. So I'll introduce myself first here. If I can get on the right window, there we go. So I am Christy Baki. I use she, her pronouns. Hi, y'all. I am the Curriculum and Professional Development Coordinator for the OSU Extension Service Outdoor School team. And I was part of a bigger team that developed these self-evaluation tools. And I'm fortunate to have one of my co-authors, my collaborators on these projects here with us. So I'm actually going to pass it over to Dr. Braun to introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. Steve Braun. I use he, him pronouns. So before we start, I just want to offer folks an opportunity to assent or not assent. So as we're using these self-evaluation tools, we're also wanting to do some research on how, in fact, this is occurring. And so I guess what I want to say is that if you're comfortable with this transcript being used for research purposes, that would be, if you're uncomfortable with these transcripts being used for research purposes, you can send me privately a confidential text message, then I can either redact or we just wouldn't use this particular session for research purposes. One piece that I just want to affirm to everyone is one of my roles as an outside evaluator is that I am apart from OSU, a funding agency. And so while OSU, the funding agency, always asserts that, performance for anything will never be used in a punitive way, and that there's that. Also, as an extra kind of layer of responsibility and confidentiality, I am used to actually hold some of those data. And so anyways, if you're uncomfortable, send me a private text. It'll just go to me, not text, but chat. And in addition, if at some point or another, you're like, man, I really want to participate more deeply in what self-evaluation tool research looks like so that we can affect the larger field of environmental and outdoor education. I'm putting a little link in here for just a little consent form, and then we'd follow up with you on a phone call and go from there. So thank you.
Thanks, Steve. And would you also please put your email into the chat so that if folks have any changes in their consent or anything, they have a way to contact you after this meeting and its chat have closed. Thank you, Steve. Awesome. Okay, great. So as I said, we're here for a panel about the self-evaluation tools. And we just came, some of us, from a session where I actually gave an introduction to these tools. So we're not going to make you sit through that again. But I did want to sort of show the three tools in case you aren't familiar, and especially to highlight that they have acronyms, which I suspect our panelists will be using as they're sharing. And so the OSU Extension Service Outdoor School Program, in collaboration with some partners, including Steve Braun, have created these three self-evaluation tools. And part of the impetus for creating these tools is that, we're often saying we should be centering equity in our programming at outdoor school. And we want equity to be infused in sort of every layer of outdoor school. But then what does it actually look like to do that? And so these tools are meant to help sort of break down that big challenge into chunks that are a little bit more manageable to deal with. And so we have three tools. The first is the instructional resource self-evaluation tool, which is used for looking at instructional resources. So lesson plans, field studies, whatever sorts of instructional resources you use as part of your programming. And then taking a look at all of those together, look at your whole curriculum. Okay, where are we now? Where do we want to go? And sort of moving through that process. And we call that instructional resource self-evaluation tool the ERSET. And the next one is the cultural responsiveness self-evaluation tool, which is, as the name indicates, about how do we make our programs more culturally responsive. So this looks at everything from like, what's our mission and vision? Like, how do we approach staffing, all the way down into some programmatic things. And we call this one the CUR set. And then finally, the special education and accessibility self-evaluation tool. A lot of this is focused on how do we make sure that students with disabilities, especially those who receive special education services, are fully included in outdoor school. And we call that one the C set. So the ER set, the CUR set, and the C set. And after I introduce our panelists, I will type those into the chat with their acronyms, so that if you need to refer back to them as the panelists are speaking, you will be able to just look in the chat and do that. And pretty much this almost has been enough from me, because you're not here to listen to me talk. I'm super excited that we have 3 panelists who have volunteered to share their experiences using the self-evaluation tools with us today. So we have Sarah Kelly from Coyote Outdoor School in Eugene, Janet O'Hara from the Omsi Hancock Field Station, and Bethany OK Carr from Rogue Environmental Ed in Grants Pass. One of those days. So super excited to have all 3 of them here. They're each going to spend about up to 10 minutes telling you about their experience of using one or more of the self-evaluation tools. If you have questions while they are sharing, you're welcome to type them into the chat. After they have all shared, we will sort of open up that question and answer period. You'll be able to, we have a pretty small group here, so you'll be able to mute and unmute during the question and answer period if you'd prefer to ask your questions out loud. But do feel free to type them into the chat as we go along, if that works best for you. And if your question is for a specific person and you're typing it in the chat, if you could just indicate their name so that we know who to ask the question to. So let's see, do we have a volunteer? Bethany, would you be willing to start us off? Awesome. Okay, well, I'm going to mute myself and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you don't have to look at this map and can instead take a look at Bethany while she's talking, and we'll hear about her experience. So thanks so much for being here, Bethany.
Yeah, thanks. So hi, everyone. I'm Bethany OK Carr, and I'm the program director for Rogue Environmental Ed in Grants Pass, Oregon. And we're a really new program, and we're pretty darn small. And so kind of our process in using these self-evaluation tools has been pretty integral in the way that we have begun to develop our program. So we had programming last spring. This spring will be our 2nd year. So kind of to get a sense of where we're at in this program development, we're really new. And I really appreciate, especially, Christy kind of lined it up as like, these are kind of snapshots of like some of the ways that we can implement some of these pieces into the programs. And for me, that's really, really helpful to have. So as soon as I found these self-evaluation tools, I was like, yes, give me, please. Because I think as an educator, I get really excited at all kinds of new ideas, and definitely have the tendency to kind of just start running with things before I think them all the way through. And as a classroom teacher, standards were like my best friend, even though I didn't necessarily like stick to the standards. They really helped to guide me to stay focused, because as personally as an educator, that is one of my challenges, is to like stay focused and hone in on what is maybe really important, and then find my own ways to do that. And so that's kind of the way that I approached using these tools, was kind of a way to help focus all of the array of ideas that are out there. So whether or not it was like the curriculum or the program structures or different things like that, this was really helpful for us. And so I said, we're a really small team. We've got 2 full-time staff, me being one of them. And then we hire our seasonal staff as well. And so preparing to use the tool, we kind of have a couple of questions to help guide us through this panel too. Some of the things that we were really working on as our program is getting started is centering equity, diversity, and inclusion and culturally responsive practices into our program from the get-go as like our foundation. And so the Curset was the tool that we have used the most of the three at this point. And we've really utilized it to help envision our goals and our program as a whole, including the curriculum aspects. And along with this self-evaluation tool, because we're trying to center the EDI work as the foundation of our program, we applied for the OSU EDI grant, and using the Curset as a piece of that to kind of ground our program work and our personal work in continuing with creating that foundation. So we started by doing the self-evaluation, and then we also have been working closely with the Center for Diversity in the Environment, and we've been doing book studies on culturally responsive teaching in the brain, and have been working with independent EDI consultants throughout the process as well. When we actually used the tool, it was very old school, like print it out with highlighters and really just like go through it. And one of the pieces that we've been working on as a staff and as a team is that like slowing down process. So we really tried to focus on one section at a time and spend about a week on it. So we would like do our initial independent review of where we felt like we were, and then we would come back together and have some conversation, and then try to do some more personal work, and then come back together again and like have that reflection time to come back to it a couple times. We noted a lot of questions in the sidebars. Like, I think that was one of the really helpful aspects of the process for us was noticing and finding our awareness of a lot of our the holes in our personal awareness and our knowledge of some of the EDI practices, so that moving forward as we continued with a lot of the workshops and continue to practice that those questions that using the evaluation tool became pretty important to us as we looked to the last piece of it, is like, now what do we do with this information? So after we had like worked through and tallied all of our different results and kind of did some narrowing, and this was months later, I think this whole process took us about 4.5 months, because we were wanting to integrate some of the work we were doing with our EDI consultants, as well as the workshops we were taking and the books we were reading, to kind of grow our capacity of understanding what it was we really wanted to focus on as our program continues to grow. So we outlined 2 focus areas from the Curset, and we made these decisions kind of based on where we were as a program being so new, and our capacity to grow faster in some areas more than others, because we know that there are some areas of growth that we really want to participate in, but they're going to take a lot more time. And so like jumping in to some of those relationship building pieces is really important to start right away, because we know that they're going to take a long time to grow. And also, because we were reading books like Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, we felt really comfortable taking on some of the curriculum pieces. So I'll just share with you really quick. I'll share my screen, just one slide here. It just kind of shows what our outcomes were, and then I'll be done. So we chose 2 focus areas. So Perfect. We chose 2 focus areas. We, from the end of that process, that was about 4.5 months long, we chose some curriculum goals. So we are still very much in the process of developing the curriculum we want to work with. And then we also chose some outreach goals, because that was one of the pieces that we felt like we needed to start right away, because we know that it's one that takes a lot of time. So yeah, that's pretty much our process.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bethany. So fascinating to learn about all the different ways that these tools are used and like what the process looks like for a program that's just starting out. So thank you very much for sharing. Let's see, Janet, you are the next one on my screen. Would you be willing to share next?
I would love to.
Awesome. Thanks, Janet. We're happy to have you here.
Happy to be here. Thank you. So I'm Janet, and I am the on-site manager at Omsi's Hancock Field Station, and that is in the eastern-ish part of the state. It's about 2.5 hours northeast of Bend. Familiar where that is? We're near Fossil in the Clarno area of eastern north central Oregon. And OMSI stands for, if you're unfamiliar, OMSI, OMSI, stands for the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry. And that is a science museum in Portland, Oregon. And that science museum owns and operates 2 small camps. One is out in Newport, Oregon on the coast, and one is here near Fossil, where I am, called Hancock Field Station. And so we have a pretty unique situation to be backed by a science museum. Having a museum-based outdoor education program is, I think, pretty unique. So we are a provider of outdoor school, and we're also a site for outdoor school. So we own and operate both the site and the program. And so with that luxury of being backed by a larger organization, we get to follow along with the 20-year vision of the organization. It's broken up into different 5-year strategic plans. Within one of those strategic plans came an equity action framework. And so I think starting back in 2018 or 2019, OMSI started making, we're always committed to it, but we made an intentional commitment and started investing in an equity action framework for the entire organization, and trying to figure out where the camps fit within that has been an interesting and fascinating process. I've learned a lot. So that's a little bit of background about what and who we are. Our camp is very small, it's very rustic, and it's very dry out here. And I do apologize, I don't have any slides, I don't have any visuals. This is all very auditory, so I apologize for that. I do have one little thing I can show you about how our team tackled we did the special education and accessibility self-evaluation because in 2018, I think it was 18 or 19, we had an organization called Transactive out of Portland come visit and do a site assessment to see how accessible our facility and program was in terms of gender. And one of the things that came out of that was this restroom focus and making sure that all of our users feel safe in every aspect. And one of the most basic needs of having a restroom that feels safe and accessible. So we had our eye on that as one of the first things to change. And right before the pandemic, we were very energized and had this, we were coordinating with architects and had this master plan for Hancock Field Station, which never has, built in 1951, or started in 1951, built by volunteers in the 60s and 70s, and built by volunteers in the 60s and 70s, and not much updating since then. So now we have this master plan, and then the pandemic hits. So then our team went from a lot to 3 of us. However, with the 3 of us, we were very excited that this came up because we also had on the horizon a site evaluation from empowering access out of Bend, Oregon. And so we had that on the horizon, and the three of us were still very energized to go through the CSET for a program in our facility. And that happened in September. Empowering Access came out and did our site evaluation. We're still waiting on the report, and very excited for that report. Some really interesting things came out of that, and it was very eye-opening, but a lot of things were not surprising. The terrain is rocky, uneven, and all gravel, and the facility itself isn't very accessible, but we're working on it. Meaningful change happens over time, which is the setup for this thing. The CSETs for us, knowing that it's going to take a long time for us to really make meaningful change, and using this, we feel very privileged and honored to be able to use this as a guide. So we went through this in August of 2021, the CSET as a team, myself, the manager of Camp Gray out in Newport, and then Steve, our director who works in Omsi in Portland. And so the three of us went through it. We had no idea where to start. And that's kind of the point. One of the things that automatically says at the beginning, you might not know where to start. And you're like, yes, guilty. We have no idea. So we just kind of did what made sense for us. And like Bethany pointed out, print it out and highlight. But since we were all three remote, we did that on a OneNote, a Microsoft OneNote. I can show you that a little bit, but I want to just point out, I can show you what we did, and then just two things I think that came with this was I spent about a week mentally and emotionally preparing to self-evaluate, because we knew that like there was going to be a lot of stuff that we identified about ourselves and it wasn't personal. And so we're trying not to take something out of our control personally. So I think that was an important step, was recognizing that we are going to be evaluating ourselves, and not to get defensive and not to get super bogged down in all of the details, and kind of go down, don't self-deprecate, because that's not useful. So I had to kind of like, get myself together and that, go through it. And then the other thing that I wanted to point out that came out of this was, as far as special education and coordinating with special education for our program, we leave a lot of that to the schools. So it's a very passive approach is what we have. And so with this tool, we've realized that we need to take a more active approach in that. And so that's what we're going to start implementing very soon. It's a good reminder that you asked me to do this, Christy, so thank you. Because we're doing that right now. And so we need to do that more actively and specifically, as opposed to just a blanket question to our districts and to our teachers and to our schools. So just saying, how can we accommodate you? Just break it down very specifically, and ask specific questions on how we can help make this outdoor school experience truly accessible to everyone. So really quickly, I have no idea how I'm doing on time. I'm sorry.
You have 2 minutes left, which you're welcome to use or not. It's up to you.
Okay. Let's see. Just show you this real quick. So this is like copy and pasted from the OSU website. And there was a lot of things I didn't know about, especially in here about IEP and 504 plans. I'm not a formal educator. I've been informal my entire career. And so that was really nice to have that context and to know, and then how to apply this to us. So we did that, and then we held our team meeting, kind of broke it down into, again, just taking screenshots from the website, went through everything, and the pink is things that we can do better. The blue is like, yeah, we're kind of doing that, and the green is like, yes, that's the thing that we've done. So we in our meeting, I was very happy. I took good notes because a lot has happened since August of 2021. So we took some good notes, broke it down into they have it broken down for you into collaboration and compliance, facility and programs, and then teaching and learning inclusive practices. So we've had one team meeting so far, and I imagine there will be many, many more.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Janet. And you have some shout outs in the chat for your bravery and sharing how hard it is to be vulnerable and prepare to do a self-evaluation. Thanks for that. All right. Oh, right on time. My timer just went off. All right. So next I'm going to invite Sarah Kelly to share a bit about how they have used the tools. Thanks for being here, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And it's good to go last because I was like, I don't know which one I'm going to feature. And since Bethany talked about the CUR set and Janet talked about the C set, I actually have the most to share about the ER set. So that worked out well. So the instructional resource self-evaluation tool, that's what I'll focus primarily on. And then I'll tell you a little bit about how we're planning on doing some evaluation for culturally responsive education and for special education. But backing up, my name is Sarah. I go by Redbud at Outdoor School. This is a redbud tree in the snow. And if you see me throughout the seasons, I'm going to start changing out my background so you can see how a redbud develops and what it looks like throughout the year. So that's my new fun thing I'm doing. I use she, her pronouns, and I previously worked at Whole Earth Nature School and Coyote Outdoor School as the outdoor school director. I was the first outdoor school director for the program. We did have outdoor school at Whole Earth Nature School in Eugene. Prior to that, we had a really small program for the first few years, mostly doing day programs with a couple of the schools that we also run after school programs with. But in the last 3 years, we have really grown significantly. We've developed a lot of programming, a lot of structure around our program. And in this last year, we decided to split my previous role into 2 positions so that we had more capacity to focus on equity, to focus on these evaluation tools, and many of the other projects that we've started and not completed to have more equitable and inclusive experiences for our students. So I am now working as the Equity and Engagement Director. I'm the liaison for all of our schools, all of our families. So we have one person who's very familiar with the program, very familiar with how we can provide accommodations to students, who is their key contact, and then having a separate director who is running programs on site and also doing a lot of equity work and actually implementing it. So we just hired our new outdoor school director. Their name is Hales Wilson, and they were previously working at the University of Oregon as the LGBTQ support services coordinator. So they also have a background in residential life in universities, so bring a lot of great experience to our program. So that's a little bit about us. I don't have as much context, I think, prepared as Bethany and Janet did. So I'm really just going to dive into the nitty gritty of what we did with the ER set. We first, I think, learned about the ER set during the outdoor school gathering that happened in person in 2020. What does that even mean? So there was a pilot session during that conference. And after the conference, I was like, hey, OSU, can I please get that tool? And they were like, hey, it's not done yet. And I was like, but we're redesigning our curriculum, please, please, please. And they were like, okay. So we actually used the tool before it was finalized. We had a workshop with our 2 executive directors of Whole Earth Nature School who really developed a lot of the curriculum for our organization throughout the years. And then myself and our assistant director, Pete Hurst. And at that time of the year, we didn't have any availability for our instructors. We had no time for them to do any prep work before outdoor school training happened later in the season. So it was just the 4 of us doing this curriculum redesign. And we did look at a lot of different feedback in order to redesign our curriculum and use a lot of different professional development tools in addition to the ERSET. We also were looking at universal design for learning. We were looking at the common measures evaluation that we got from Steve Braun, which our students filled out in the previous season. We also have in-house evaluation tools that we use with staff, with our school teachers. And so we were able to take all of that feedback and also think about what we really want to prioritize, take a step back from what we had done previously for our curriculum. And when I talk about curriculum, I'm talking about our field study unit. So we looked at our entire field study for the ERSET, not individual lessons, because we really wanted to look at the whole of how we were engaging students in learning about the land and learning from the land. So those were some other tools that we used. We also participated in the pilot session for the critical orientations workshop with Spirit Brooks and Leilani Subzalian. And we participated in the education summit at the Confederated Tribes for Grand Ronde, where they introduced the Senate Bill 13 shared history, tribal history, specifically for their tribe, so the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. So we used all of that to really contextualize what we wanted to do with our curriculum and how we wanted to modify it. And of course, also looking at Senate Bill 439. So that's a lot of tools. That's a lot of things to review. So we had everyone who was participating in the workshop review all of the tools in advance. And then we also used them within the workshop to kind of just evaluate what priorities we had based on those tools. And then we took a step back from the assessment piece and said, what do we actually want to accomplish? Like, what really do we want students to take away from their field study experience? And developed a set of goals, which I'm happy to share some of that with you all today. So let me see if I can share my screen here. I think it would be this one. So here's my notes, but here is a kind of overview of what came out of this workshop. And just give me a second to orient myself when things change around when I share my screen. It goes a little crazy. So what we really came away with is that we wanted to take a step back from the topical field studies of plants, animals, water, and soil, really integrate those activities and lessons within the content of the experience, but take a step back and really look at what is the theme? What are we really trying to accomplish with our students? And as we were assessing these tools, I'm going to scroll down here. There's this question that we asked ourselves, trying to really center equity. So how can we engage and accommodate all students in learning, inclusive of all their diverse identities and experiences? Specifically, how are we equitably engaging students who are neurodiverse, who are Black, Indigenous, or people of color, who are English language learners, who are members of the LGBTQIA community, who are deaf or hard of hearing, who are blind or visually impaired, as well as students with chronic health conditions, cognitive or physical disabilities, and who experience trauma. And the reason why we that's a lot of people to focus on, but the reason why we focused on these communities and these groups is because we know that we haven't prioritized how we're developing education, how we're developing experiences for these groups over the course of time and history. And that has led to having experiences and programs that aren't inclusive, that aren't equitable. So we really wanted to center that in this workshop. So within this document, I kind of talk a little bit earlier. Where is that? Sorry. Oh yeah, here's the redesign. We were already there. About what we were trying to accomplish. We wanted to have the field study unit, each unit follow the one prior, which previously we were having different field studies happening simultaneously. So we'd have one group doing plants in one area, one group doing water in another area, one group doing soil, one group doing animals. And it really didn't feel aligned with everything that we were learning from the ERSET, from the evaluative measures there, from the professional development sessions we had done, and from some of my research in place-based relationships and environmental worldviews and values. So understanding how we relate to the land and how we can incorporate perspectives and worldviews outside of this dominant culture paradigm, the Western worldview that often sees nature and culture, or humans and nature, separately. That's how a lot of environmental education has been done in the past. So how can we break away from that and really try to have an inclusive experience? So that was kind of our overall goal, and the ERSET's like one piece within that. So just stopping to share and getting back to the ERSET, what we did after that workshop and looking at our goals is we had a set of activities. We had a flow that we were proposing to ourselves to launch. And then we used the ERSET old school style too, printed it out and went through each individual item and said, how are we doing this now in this new proposal for the curriculum? What level are we at? And a big thing that came up for us is, how do we know that our instructors on the ground are going to understand the intention of the design enough that this actually happens with the students? So that's the piece that we're still working out. We are for context, this all happened a couple weeks before the pandemic hit. So everything that we proposed was in the mindset of prior to the pandemic. And we weren't actually able to launch the curriculum in the way that we had intended because we had to have online curriculum. So we quickly pivoted to how can we develop a curriculum that will be accessible to our students at home, that they can do on their own, that is easy to understand. And that meant that a lot of the on the ground activities looked different, but our themes stayed the same. So the theme of we are all connected through the land is our like overarching theme for our field study unit. And then our individual field studies are learning from the land as home, land in process, and caring for the land. And within our curriculum, I think we were really focused on just looking at the ERSET, respectfully includes Indigenous experiences and relationships to the land. That is like kind of the key piece of what we were doing with our redesign. And within that focus, I think a lot of the things are connected to that, like reflection, like being culturally responsive, because we're pulling from students what their stories are. We open every field study with a story of the land that contextualizes us in place, in time, in history. And then we have an experience that the students get to share their story so that they can connect their experiences, their cultures, their families to what we're learning there and our shared understanding of what the land is. How am I on time? Because I could keep going on for.
You are about out.
I'm about out. Okay.
I was about to send you a message in the chat just to save a little bit of time if anybody has a question that they'd like to toss out to the panel. I didn't see any coming in to the chat while we were talking, but we have a few minutes. Thanks so much, Sarah. Sorry that
absolutely.
Sort of cut you off midstream.
No, I'm happy to share more, and sorry, I get so excited talking about this stuff. So I think I just was babbling a little bit.
The message I was writing you was like, I could listen to this forever and I would love to make space for some questions. So let's see if anybody wants to either type something into the chat or unmute themselves and ask a question to one or all of our panelists. Please go for it.
I'll ask a question then. Janet, something you raised really sparked me, this idea of preparing for self-evaluation. And that was a learning moment for me of being like, oh yeah, how presumptuous am I, right? Like, hey folks, evaluation, it's good for learning and it's going to move us forward. And then there's like this checkpoint. And that, so I guess for everyone, my question would be, and I'll target a little, Janet, if you have any particular insights on that process. And then Sarah and Bethany, if you have anything that came up for you all as you went through self-evaluation, right? Anything from how that feels for oneself, you know, like to how it might look for someone else, or this idea we need to be perfect. You know, it's like we all need, yeah. So I won't answer the question. I'll just pose it and step away.
Yeah, I can jump in on that. How it felt, I think, for me, at first, it was very like there was a physiological reaction. Like I felt it in my body. It's usually around here. I don't know if it's like anxiety. I don't know what it is. I haven't identified it yet, but maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's guilt, maybe it's shame, maybe it's, I don't know. I don't know what it is, but what I think it shows is that we care about what we do, and that we're willing to feel uncomfortable in order to, like, physically, emotionally, mentally feel uncomfortable in order to make meaningful change in our programs, our facilities, in our everything.
Yeah, Bethany or Sarah, anything you'd like to add to that?
I think, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Bethany.
I think just that what really resonates with me that you just said, Janet, is like that we care so much about these programs. And I think there's, for me in this process, and like throughout the entire process of developing a program and like learning and growing as an individual as well through EDI work that I've been doing, the thing that I just continue to struggle with so much is this sense of professionalism. And I think with the self-evaluation, that comes into play as well, because it's like, well, I want to have this really, I care so much about this program and I want it to be so good. And now I have to think about the ways, like I have to reframe it for myself, right? Like doing this work is the professionalism, right? It's not necessarily like where I'm at right now. Like that doesn't make as much of, that's not as important. Like the way that it looks to other people, I think I get caught up in that a lot. And I think it's like that acceptance of messiness, and that like that this work is what makes it, like, shows how much we care about the program.
Well, as the room host, I'm going to interrupt briefly and just remind folks we're at time. I can keep the room open if people want to keep chatting, but I thank you all so much for being so vulnerable and honest with us. That all stood out to me as well, like the eval piece. I get anxious too, so I really appreciate that discussion around that. And I'm going to share the link to the survey link there. And I welcome you all to just keep chatting. But I did want to just point out the time and share those couple of things with you.
Thanks, Amy. And yeah, Sarah, if you have a couple moments, I'd love to hear what you might have to add to that. But also, it's totally lunchtime for the next hour, so everyone should feel fully empowered to click that red leave button on the bottom corner of the Zoom. And I'll pop my email address up here in case you want to chat more. But Sarah, if you have a couple minutes and have any thoughts you'd like to add to that question, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, and I'm happy to hang out too if there's other questions. I definitely can relate to what both Janet and Bethany said, and I think it's really hard when we see it as like a final program, right? That sometimes we will see it as like, we're not doing these things. We're doing all this work. We're trying so hard and we're still failing in these ways. And so rather than framing it that way, And this is kind of just how I am. It's an attribute of mine. I'm a very process-oriented person. And that's another reason why we have land and process as one of our themes. It's like understanding that land is constantly changing. We are constantly changing. And to get to where we want to be, we're going to be improving and evolving, failing, trying, testing constantly. So I think there's some peace that comes with that, like just seeing it as a process, seeing it as us giving ourselves space to reflect and grow and make mistakes. And then in terms of our structures that we try to set up for our staff, we have a program called Justice Talks where we create that space, to have difficult conversations about justice issues and apply it to our work and to be messy and to process together in a way that we can be safe and understand our areas of privilege and our areas where we may be marginalized. And then incorporating those things in our training with our staff so that we're doing identity work at the outset and that we are creating an environment where we're making it normal to have those conversations. And it really helps for us to be able to relate to our students and their experiences too.
Thanks so much, Sarah. So I would like to give a huge thank you to all three of you. This has just been so informative. And I echo something Steve put in the chat, which is I just feel so fortunate that we get to see you and experience you doing this work alongside of us. It's super cool. So thanks so much for being here and for being so open in your sharing. And I have tossed my email address into the chat for anyone who wants to request printed copies of the tools. Sounded like the old-fashioned writing and highlighting is a popular way to use them, and we're happy to mail tools out, paper copies to anybody. So just let me know what we can do to support you. And I think Amy popped in the post-session evaluation if you have a couple minutes to do one of those. And with that, I'll say enjoy your lunch break. We'll see you hopefully at the Elevate Outdoor School session at 12:45. So thanks so much, folks, for being here.
Which I just noticed. Thank you so much. It says 12:20 that starts at 12:25, but I think we are doing a whole hour for lunch before that starts, right?
Yeah, I believe that's at 12:45.
Okay, I was just gonna send a note and maybe they can update that really quick. Great, thank you so much, everybody.